My name is Zach Comeau, and you're listening to the My TechDecisions Podcast. Thanks for coming back to another episode of the My TechDecisions Podcast. Like I said, my name is Zach, and I'm your host. Today's episode is about digital signage and how the industry is evolving to meet the needs of end users who are demanding increasingly more powerful solutions. To tell us about advancements in the industry are Chris Feldman and George Borden, digital signage experts from Sharp NEC Display Solutions. Specifically, Chris and George highlight the Intel Smart Display module, a new solution that helps keep pace with digital display technology and provides end users with additional computing power and flexibility while future-proofing their signage investments. This is a new standard that's being incorporated into NEC displays, and is sort of an evolution of the open pluggable specification that NEC helped develop alongside Intel and Microsoft in 2010. Before we get to that interview, here's a quick reminder that the My TechDecisions podcast is available on iTunes and the Google Play Store. Download and subscribe to hear weekly interviews with technology experts that can help you make the right decisions for your company. And now, here are Chris and George. So gentlemen, as displays are getting slimmer, how is the industry evolving to provide some additional computing power? Chris, let's start with you.
So with displays, they're not just getting slimmer, but they're also getting more robust, right? So higher resolutions such as 4K and even 8K now are coming into the market. And so computing solutions have to adapt with those ever-changing resolutions and expectations of the market and the customer. So what we're doing by adopting the SDM format is the SDM format uses a PCIe Express connector internally inside the display, which allows for much greater bandwidth to allow for higher resolutions and more data pass-through than we've been capable of with the OPS. So from a technical perspective, it's going to give the customer or the end user a much greater level of future-proofing that they would have had previously with the OPS, which is currently maxed out.
Yeah, George, same question. How are we innovating to keep up with these improvements in digital signage technology?
Well, one of the great things about this new Intel platform is that the processing technology is going to increase and become faster and better. And as Chris mentioned, the 8K technologies are going to be coming down the road. We're going to be positioned uniquely to power those solutions. As marketability and awareness becomes ever so growing over time, the SDM platform will definitely help us grow into the future.
Yeah, and one other thing I can kind of bring up to that as well. SDM is available in two formats. There's SDM-S for small and SDM-L for large. And the NEC displays actually accept both. So there's a SDM-L slot that's actually built into the display. And so the end user can choose to either use the SDM-S small slot or the large one. And with the large format, you can actually use desktop CPUs, provided you have enough wattage inside the monitor to support those new CPUs. So you're going to get a lot more options regarding computing power or CPU usage than you ever had with the OPS, which was limited to strictly the high-end mobile market.
So can we talk about the open and pluggable specification OPS that you guys, Intel and Microsoft, developed in about 10 years ago? Why was it developed? What does it accomplish? And how is the Intel SDM evolved from that?
So the open pluggable specification really was created by Intel after they looked at the market and seeing how their processors were being used. From an administrator standpoint, one of the things that you want to do is you want to have a certain level of standardization across a network, so that way serviceability and maintenance and all those things are kind of are all wrapped together in a much easier package to deal with. But what they were finding as they were looking into the market, looking at the end user, and looking at where their CPUs are being utilized in the market, they were in all different kinds of form factors. So you had them in all varying different size chassis, different types of outputs. There's no standardization. So if you have a national rollout for a signage application, in one space it might be using HDMI, and another space might be using VGA. Then there's DisplayPort, mini DisplayPort. There's all these different ways of connecting to it, and none of it was standardized, right? If you think about it at home, if you have a DVD player and you plug it into your TV, it's just an HDMI cord. It doesn't matter which one, not really, right? You have an HDMI cord, the two just plug in together, and it's a standard. But that didn't exist in digital signage. And so the open pluggable specification was created to create that standard. And so, one, you created this modular way of connecting to a screen that allowed not only computing solutions, but also accessories for expandability. And that was only possible because of this standardization. Moving to the SDM, this is now the next logical iteration of that form fat. One of the things I talked about earlier, by moving to 8K, right now OPS doesn't support that directly. So what you need to do is you need to move to the next step up, which is SDM.
Yeah, George, anything to add?
No, actually, just at the time, that this came out, and I have of course, I'm all about show and tell. So, I have an OPS player here in my hand, has a chassis on it. It was definitely a game changer. And digital signage, they were velcroing computers on the back of displays, and this made it from an end user perspective, a much more pleasing installation. Just simply put it on the wall, one power supply. Your cords were minimized. It was just a much better way to go. But as we'll continue to talk about, the SDM doesn't have a chassis anymore. It's smaller. Everything's becoming better, faster, cheaper in technology, and we're now on to that next progression. Obviously, it reached its end of life, and with the new connector now and the ability to do higher speeds moving into the future, that's where we want to go.
And we mentioned end user. So what are the main benefits to the end user? What kind of flexibility does the Intel SDM provide?
Well, like I mentioned before, it's a standard, right? So if you're going to launch a network of either signage or wayfinding or whatever it is you're doing with a computer and a display, that it allows you to be able to readily be able to service that. Even if you do have variants within what is being utilized, meaning, you have something that's rolled out over several years. The lifespan of one of these signage PCs is typically 12 to 18 months. So if you have something that you roll out over 3 to 5 years, you may have 2 or 3 different models within that network that you're utilizing. But because everything's within the same standard of connectivity, all the hardware, all the tools, all the service manuals, and everything that you create, those are going to all be still valid, right? I mean, the inner workings are going to be a little different, but what you have is you have a connectivity standard that is ubiquitous across the entire network. And so also with the slot as well, we do have the ability to also create accessories, right? So as I mentioned earlier, there's the 2 form factors, SDML and SDMS. One of the things that we have right now, we currently have a SDMS tuner. So you can actually add ATSC, NTSC tuning capability to grade screens utilizing the SDM format. Not later in this year, but early next year, working to release HD-based-T, NDI, SMPT, a whole bunch of different options within that one slot form factor. So some of the things you enjoyed with the OPS, being able to add accessories, being able to add computers, we are also now bringing into the SDM world as well.
How many products, are compatible with the Intel SDM? Are they just displays? What about projectors or interactive whiteboards?
So that's really the great thing about SDM. Because we have the ability to kind of transition between different types of processors and different types of form factors, you can actually create one that will run off a much lower power supply. So what that's going to do is that's going to open up the market to be able to utilize these PC form factors in much different types of products, such as desktop monitors or even mobile projectors. Currently, right now, on all our new screens that we will be releasing, so that's our new M, ME, MA, and new P-series displays. Those all have the SDM slot. We have some more new products coming out that will also, in the collaboration space, that will also have an SDM slot as well. And this form factor is really providing a lot of different opportunities for us to really offer greater computing and more robust computing possibilities for the end user.
this position digital signage technology for the future, as things like you mentioned, 8K is kind of around the corner?
Well, it's not just resolution, right? So there's other functionality that goes into computing as well. One of the more exciting things that are happening in computing in signage is near-field Bluetooth connectivity. This is something that's being utilized in collaboration right now. So you can essentially memorize certain devices such as a cell phone, and when you walk up to a computer that's running the SDM, it can actually log you into your account and be able to recognize that. You'll be able to connect to different types of hardware, such as speakers and microphones easily, without having to wire things in and that sort of compatibility. And so more than just resolution capability, there's more functionality that's being built into it. As I mentioned earlier, that new bus connector is really opening up a lot of possibilities where you can do more with less.
I'll go ahead and just chime in a little bit from the generic level. I mean, this is definitely a game changer in the industry on a lot of levels. From the end user perspective, the ability to remote into the product, for administrative needs, that's available. The ability to run different operating systems, it can run Android, it can run Linux, it can run the Windows operating system. Everybody that has their established rules and regulations now, they're going to be able to jump over this very seamlessly. And so as the technology proliferates more and it gets more out there in the field, as more developers start to develop more software packages and integrated hardware solutions in addition to the screen technology, it's just only going to grow. I like the fact that it's smaller, of the sheer fact that there's two different sizes that can be positioned. Us as technology manufacturers, that gives us a lot of leeway in design, and as Chris mentioned, power requirements allows us to do a lot of different things from a design standpoint. So it's only going to benefit the end user in numerous different ways. And also, ultimately, as we hopefully get back to on-prem, business, analytics are going to still become a big deal. These, faster processors, they're going to be able to, crunch more data, put it into the machine learning engine type of things, and be able to give actionable intelligence to the end user as well. So I'm really excited about SDM and our partnership with Sharp NEC and how we're going to affect our end users moving forward.
So when the OPS came out, there were internal options before, right? So NEC had its SBC, LG had an option, there's a few others that were out there. And so they're very proprietary, and it was more of a niche type market. When OPS came out and standardized the whole connectivity process, so you could have just a random PC OEM create one and sell it and do well with that product, because it could be sold not just to an NEC, but anything that had an OPS. That really helped kind of get the idea of utilizing an internal PC as part of your project. I'm sure that up until that point, there was always some hesitancy before doing something like that, because you never know what would happen, right? Because you're dealing with PCs, they're, like I mentioned earlier, 12 to 18 months on a life cycle. You would, your project could be halfway to the home, and all of a sudden you can't buy that PC anymore, and what do? But now, that's been created. So I think with SDM, those that have been utilizing the internal PCs, this is unique. So now that if they are an early adopter, they can start converting their networks over. And you're talking a very significant amount of length of time that this product is going to be supported. So, for what a length of time that we had the OPS, this SDM format is going to be around at least that long, if not longer. Because right now, they have a cap on what it can do, but I think that's arbitrary. There's a lot more I think that we can do with this. So, there's a huge amount of support from Intel on there. There's a huge amount of industry support in the AV world. This is really a great time to either convert over to the SDM, or if you've never adopted internal PC beforehand, this would be a great time to do that.
Right. Yeah, and it's not just NEC that's adopting this standard. It's a whole bunch of display manufacturers as well, which I think gives a lot of weight to this particular movement.
Right.
Yeah.
So just like I mentioned earlier with HDMI, right? So we're not the only display manufacturer that has HDMI. And so the idea is that if you had specific needs and you needed to change between different manufacturers, which we're all for all NEC. But if you did have that opportunity where you didn't need to mix them for whatever reason, you can still standardize on that one PC and still have that connectivity that you need.
Well, thanks very much, guys, for coming on the podcast and telling us about the Intel STM and how it's driving the digital signage market forward. We appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the My Tech Decisions podcast, where it's our mission to help you make technology decisions for your company. If you would like to learn more, head to mytechdecisions.com or follow us on Twitter at mytechdecisions. You can also follow me on Twitter at ZW Comeau. Until next time.